Take it
Hey
away.
everybody, it's Kathy and Coach Minuin, and we are here today with REI Durus. We're going to do a really quick lunch and learn with Jacob Choi over at Pimlico Capital. He's going to kind of give us the skinny on what they do as far as commercial multifamily property lending, and then we're going to come back on the 30th and he's going to dive in a little deeper. So today is just going to be kind of the outline, and then on the 30th he's going to go deeper and we'll be live versus recorded then. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us today, and tell us the best parts of your lending on commercial properties.
Good afternoon. Thank you, REI Durus, for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk about such a unique but flexible asset class. Something that is really, I think, unique to the commercial multifamily space is how many different types of ways there are to get those deals done, both on the entrance, the bridge section, the gap section, and then the overall stabilization section. So it's a big glamorous word, commercial multifamily. But what does it mean? So when we say commercial multifamily, it's really the 5+ residential assets. If you have a property that's over the 1 to 4 units, it's then considered commercial multifamily. What we do really, and because we are primarily a DSCR lender, is attack the 1 to 10 units, the 1 to 10 unit space. So for this, it would be the 5 to 10 unit space. Reason being, the DSCR loans are based exclusively on your cash flow and expenses. Now, commercial multifamily tends to have very high net operating income, but they also tend to have a lot more expenses. So sometimes when you get to the higher unit counts, you're looking more at real income-based conventional loans as a better fit than the standard DSCR. But DSCR does play very, very well with this asset class in the 5 to 10 units, because something exciting about these is when you get into this, you start talking a lot more about cap rates. When you talk about cap rates, the rate of capitalization, what you're really doing is analyzing the profitability to value of the property. And when I do a DSCR loan, I'm analyzing the same thing. So it makes it a very quick calculation. You know, if you're at a 7 cap and I know the rates are X and your DSCR is Y, it's very easy to fit those things together and figure out, is this going to make sense or not? But that's way on the back end. That's when we've done everything we needed to do, you know, put together some pro forma or you know, everybody loves spreadsheets in the commercial multifamily world, with a real plan. You know, I got in at this price, I improved the units this way, I'm going to increase the rents, you know, 3% annually, 5% annually. And you start to paint a picture to really maximize the value you're getting per square foot and the value you're getting from each unit. So the normal, and I says, you know, it's a very flexible space. The normal sort of process to get into these, if you're doing value add, there's an acquisition piece, right? A lot of people come to me for the hard money side, which we can do. We'll fund the renovation 100%. There's a lot of alternatives to that, though. Some people use me in part. They get syndication. They have some other equity partners, or they do the whole thing cash and are relying on a very, very large lump sum on the end to pay them back. All of these things are possible in this realm, in this space. If I can say on your exit, I have no problem getting you 75% on a cash out, right? But you have already mapped out that your costs are 60%. There's no reason, if you have the cash to stomach, you need the cash, but to stomach those higher payments on such a high dollar amount. So some people will go a little creative option. Some people will use me as their hard money, but if you're over 10 units, a lot of these banks, myself included, even if you're under 10 units, I want a trailing 12-month history, some trail of rents that tells me this is what you're getting. How are you going to do that if I give you a 12-month loan? You can't. So the other facet, a lot of people take on a bridge or a gap fund. So you buy the property with me or without me, you do your value add with me or without me, but then you're stuck because you're filling the units, but you also need 6 to 12 months of rental history just to get from here to the loan here. So you fill the middle with something. We do bridge funds to fill that middle space for 12 months, carrying a very low debt balance, hoping that, you know, you'll meet the seasoning requirements to have those renters in there with history of their payments. That's going to qualify you for that good 70, 75, 80% mortgage option. Jumping back a little bit into cap rates. I think that is the most important thing to look at when you're analyzing the profitability of a property. Even before you talk financing, before you talk lending, you got to understand the market. I think the lower the cap rate on average, the less risk there is in the property. But the lower the cap rate, the lower the reward. If you buy something at a 5% cap rate, what that means is every year your operating income is 5% of the total value. It also means you're buying that property at 20 times its annual earnings. A market that supports a 10 cap, a lot more volatile, a lot more risk. But what that means is you're buying that only at 10 times earnings. So there's a much higher return. People will sell you on, oh, this is a 5 cap market, a 7 cap market, an 8 cap market. But it's the same way when we discuss flips or 1 to 4 units. It's knowing your market, right? Don't let somebody pull the wool over your eyes and tell you, I'm selling this to you at a 5 cap because the market supports it. You got to do the work, look at the rents, look at the values of the properties around to know what the real going cap rate is. If you can stomach the risk, you'll make a lot more money at a lower cap rate market. You might have a lower leverage loan. You might have, you know, a little more risk and difficulties with your tenants, but you're going to make more cash. It's the cap rates in each market that you're looking in are the single most important factor when pricing out a deal. Always say you make your money on a purchase. The only way to know if your purchase price is correct is by knowing the cap rates of the market that you're buying in. A little bit about the lending side. Obviously, I will get more in depth at our next session. For 5 to 10 units, we're an open book. It's the same normal type of loan as a 1 to 4 unit DSCR, a typical, 75 on a cash out, 80% on a purchase, or a rate and term refi to carry your debt. The rates are a little bit higher and your expenses are a little bit higher. So because of that, even though I can advertise a 75 cash out and 80% rate and term or purchase, most of the time it works out a little lower. It's 65, 67%. The average LTV for multifamily property, I think last year was 73%. And that's a blend of conventional DSCR, a blend of, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 plus. But most of those on the upper end are of the conventional variety. Now, a conventional loan doesn't necessarily care if it's a cash flowing property. They care that you can pay them each month. So you can qualify for a higher balance, but those higher balances are going to make you less profitable. So the best thing, keep your cost as low as possible as usual, but reasonable. Don't constrain yourself by saying, I'm going to float a 65% LTV the whole way through if that's not going to support the rental increases you want annually. Nobody gets into these loans with a profitable future if you can't plan a rental increase year on year, right? You want to get in, if you're carrying 65%, 70%, great. As you increase your rents every single year, you bought it at a 10 cap, maybe you can sell it at a 7. Right? So you hold it for 10 years, you make your cash, and then you sell it after you've improved the property for a lump sum. And there's a double win. It's a win-win. You got the win on the hold and the win on the sale. You can keep holding it. I happen to think after a certain point, the sale price at a much lower cap rate is going to trump your benefits on holding it for that next 10 years. But markets change. We happen to be in a very high interest rate scenario. In the market, which is coloring my input, I think. But as rates go down, it's something to consider. Maybe people will start holding on to these longer, and maybe people will sell and they'll build more. The increase in multifamily interest comes, correlated to the same decrease in home ownership. So people are out there, people are looking for units. People need a place to live. And if you have a multifamily property, you've got a lot more doors to fill and a lot more checks to receive every single month. And there's financing in a whole bunch of arenas available for it.
So Jacob, just for our listeners, we're throwing out two terms. If you would explain these two terms in newbie type definition. Number one, and correct me if I'm wrong, DSCR is also sometimes just the three letters. DCR, I believe, sometimes. Am I correct or wrong? Or just explain what DSCR means and then explain cap rate.
Fair. Cool. So DSCR is what I like to call our best, an investor's best stabilized loan option. DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. The calculation is your gross monthly rents over your gross expenses. That's PITIA, your principal, your interest, your taxes, insurance, your bad debt appreciation, blah, blah, blah. If the top number is higher than the bottom number, that equation will equal over 1. And that anything over 1, let's say, if it's 1,200 over, you're grossing on a 1 unit 1,200 a month, and your interest payments, principal, your taxes, and insurance are $1,000. Your DSCR in that scenario is a 1.2. What that means is that excess 20%, that's your cash flow. It means your tenant is paying your mortgage and your expenses. You are almost for free, thinking about your initial investment still, getting back your equity. It's a very easy way for me as a lender to know you can pay me each month, and it's a very way for you as an investor to sort of just leave it as is, collect a check each month. And most DSCR loans are also set up with a servicer. So in addition to paying your mortgage payment, the servicer is also going to take a component of that, and it's going to go for you to your taxes and insurance bills. So it's the idea is it's a very scalable loan option. It's a very scalable model to sort of get in, get out, leave it, let it produce its income, and move on to the next thing. For the larger asset class, that DSCR is still important, very important. It'll go off of your gross. If it's 20 units, it's got to be, the total of 20 unit gross income over the total expenses of the property, hoping that hits over a 1.25. Now, the bottom number, the higher the units, tends to be higher, right? If I'm talking about somebody's net operating income on their property, I'll take their gross and maybe I'll deduct 30% on a 1 to 4 unit property, or maybe 5 to 10 unit property. I may deduct 35% if it's higher, right? The larger property, the more units, the more your expenses are. Sometimes more as a proportion to what your rents are, which is why the DSCR model starts to bow out a little bit as you get into those upper echelons of commercial multifamily. But with those, that's where your rental increase year on year is so pivotal, because you're trying to hit a very good stabilized rents over your stabilized expenses. And the only way to do that tends to be if you're getting in on a good deal, a good deal with a purchase price, you're not spending a fortune. The only way to really hit and capitalize on that appreciation is through the rental increases. DSCR, so that's DSCR. Cap rates is a very funky term. It means the capitalization rate. It is a very quick, high-level summary of how much the property is worth in proportion to how much it nets. So the calculation, more or less, is, I don't go off of your gross income here. Now, this is where the expenses also sort of plays a part. It's not your gross income, it's your annual net operating income. And in order to get that, you need to figure out what your expenses are and deduct that from your annual income. So if I'm making $100,000 a year off of these, let's say 5 units over here, I might say 30,000 I'm going to spend on maintenance, on property management, on, et cetera, et cetera. That would mean my net operating income annually is only $70K. So that's fine. If this is where you got to know your market, let's say that 5-unit property is in, a very heavy urban center. Let's say it's in Florida. We got crazy cap rates in Florida. Let's say they're trying to buy this thing at a 6 cap. What that would mean is, if we have I'll pull my calculator up. If we have a $70,000 annual net operating income at a 6% cap rate, that means 70,000 is 6% of the property's overall value. So what that would mean is that property is worth roughly $1.15 million. Right? I take the 70K, I divide it by 6%, and that's the value of the property. But now remember, that also means if you are buying a property based on a net operating income of 6% of the value, you're also buying that property at something close to 20 times its earnings, right? Because that's 6%, it's 20 more years to get to 100%. So those deals are in those regions that have less risk. The values change a little bit less, but you're not making as much money every single year. Why? Because your principal balance of your loan, when it's stabilized, is got to be a lot higher, because the property is worth so much more, but it's worth so much more at a ratio much lower compared to its operating, NOI, its operating income. The lower the value of the property and the higher the rents, the higher the cap rate is. Let's say that same property is in Baltimore City, right? My backyard, I wouldn't underwrite that deal at anything less than a 9 cap. I might do it at a 10 cap, not because it's necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes a 10 cap invites investors. It means I'm only buying that for 10 times what it's making. It's only going to take me 10 years to become, in the green. And that's fantastic. But what that also means is you're going to have a lot of issues with that property potentially. So it's the age-old saying, high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward. And low reward is not necessarily a bad thing. People will go to extreme lengths to mitigate their own risk, even if that means lower reward. I like to sleep at night. Some people are fine not sleeping at night, as long as they're filling their bank accounts. So it's yeah.
It's funny you say that, because when people would ask me about that before and I try to explain it to them, I say, look, those brand new apartments that they just built around the corner next to Whole Foods? I said, it's probably sitting at a 3 cap, you know what I'm saying, or a 2. I said, in the hood, where you worried about all kind of crime and stuff like, you might be sitting at a 12, sometimes in a very bad neighborhood, 15, 20% cap rate. But there's a reason that you're getting that type of return. High return, high risk. Low return, I can sleep at night. I can fly overseas, but as you said before, 20 times earning versus 7 times earning. Take your pick. So
take your pick. And there's strategies for both lines, and there's people who stand by and exclusively do one or the other. A lot of these strategies these days I'm seeing are looking at, markets like Ohio, like, little rundown Illinois, Chicago type stuff, Baltimore, Philly, where you can buy something at a 9, 10, 11, 12 cap. You get your value add, you get your bridge loan, you get the stabilized loan. Year on year, you're increasing 5, 6, 7%. If you bought it at a 12 cap, you're even after that 10 years. But if you've increased your rents year on year, 5, 7%, you're 20, 50% higher than when you started. Now the market's cap out at a certain point. You got to be in tune with that stuff.
Mhm.
But then you sell that property at a 5 cap. You know what I mean? If the market supports it, you get your return and then you sell it for a boatload of money. Some people do. If you're really looking to build a portfolio of these things, a lot of these big asset holding companies with pools of investors, whatever, they all started here, right? They started, probably a couple people in a basement one day said, this is a good property. I think we can buy this at 11 cap. They put a spreadsheet together. Year on year, we'll increase it this is our value add. This is what our trailing 12 is. And they put another term, pro forma, together. That's also an important thing, a real deal flow analysis, start to finish. And they see, in 10 years, we're profitable. We're going to be in the green on our stabilized loan with some cash flow from the property, but we are going to have all of our equity back in 10 years. But at the 10-year mark, we bought it at 12 cap. I'll sell this at a 5 cap. You know, I'll make a $2 million and then I'll go buy the next one at a 7 cap and sell that at a 4 cap. And people scale this way. And when you get really, really good at it, people want a piece of that. And that's how a lot of these very big holding companies have began. They found a lower cap or a higher cap rate market, got in, did their thing, said, we're good at this. And they went from there.
Very well.
Right.
That's great information, Jacob. We can't give away the farm right now.
Okay.
Teddy, did you have any more questions? Yeah, he really hit the good pieces of the terms that you hear everywhere. Because if
Yes.
you're out on message boards or receiving deal information, emails and stuff like that, if it's multifamily, that's one of the biggest things they'll put in there. They'll put, hey, this is this such and such cap rate. Well, if you don't understand cap rate, there's a thing called the internet. Just go look and see how to do it both ways, forward and backwards, so that you can understand the value. Because people will try to pull a wool over your eyes and say, hey, this is at a 3 cap or a 5 cap, and you're like, bro, I'm not paying that price for that property. Not like that. You see what I mean? I did the same thing when I was messing around with mobile home parks. If I did my initial numbers and it didn't come out to at least a 10 cap, I was like, don't even talk to me. Because most mobile home parks, and don't get me wrong, we've got here in the Carolinas, there are some beautiful parks.
Jacksonville.
She's seen them.
Jacksonville up near me, there's also beautiful, but I think you're absolutely right. After a certain cap rate in that asset class, the deal's no longer profitable from a long-term hold perspective.
Because remember, at the end of the day, those mobile homes are still vehicles. I'm just saying. Get mad at me if you want. I didn't make the rules. I just played by them. So
Potentially, anyway.
yeah.
I can come back to talk about that if you'd like as well.
Okay.
Oh,
There's some
great.
funky mobile home stuff out there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great cash flow. That's a really good case in point example, though, of how you do the numbers, right? That's a very high risk asset. So you have to approach it with a high risk mindset.
And a lot of these mom and pop mobile home parks, that paper trail does not exist. They've been taking cash in hand for years, not reporting it to Uncle Sam. So then when you try to go buy it, somebody's lending you the money. They're like, well, I want to see, let me see that rent roll. Don't exist. Or it's on napkins. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Kathy. That's just how they are. Everybody wants to beat Uncle Sam. Can't blame them, but that's just how they do.
Well, and business is different in different places. That's a whole nother conversation, but business is not run always the same from place to place, people to people.
That's
Anyway.
right.
All right. Well, thank you for getting us started on this topic. We will see you back at the end of the month, and we'll do a little bit more. We'll look at that document that you shared with us and find out how to use that. And at this point, we thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you again, and we'll be seeing you next month for our meetup on the 9th of December. And we're going to be talking about a lot of the new loans that you guys have, because you're always improving and changing and getting with the times, because it is a very changing time right now.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jacob. See you in 2 weeks, buddy. Thank you.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you. Thank
everybody.
you.